Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is January 22nd, 2025. I'm joined, as always, by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Good to be here.
And switching it up today, we've got Western Standard news and senior editor Dave Naylor.
What a time to be alive, Derek.
What a time. Well, before we get started, I just want to thank our sponsor. This episode of The Pipeline is sponsored by New World Precious Metals, based right here in Alberta. Years of inflationary money printing and rising debt have decimated the average Canadian savings. Silver and gold are the only currencies that have held their value for thousands of years. Last year saw gains of 30%. New World Precious Metals offers unique platforms to help protect and grow your hard-earned wealth with silver and gold. Check them out at newworldpm.com. That's newworldpm.com for New World Precious Metals. All right. Well, of course, we're going to have to be talking about the Trump revolution. What a hell of a start to a term. I mean, we're not even we can't even get close to everything. It was just the executive orders alone. That's a whole show on its own, and we wouldn't even have time to fit it into the pipeline. It's so much, but we're going to talk about the absolute roaring start of the second Trump presidency. And flowing from that, the trade war, the tariffs that Donald Trump has proposed, Danielle Smith charting her very different course than that set by the premiers and the prime minister. Some in the East and in the legacy media are calling her a traitor. We're going to talk, is she a traitor or is she a traitor? And I thought about that one. I thought that was a good one.
It was well done.
I think so. Thank you. And the Liberals appear ready to jettison the marquee policy that has largely defined them over the last decade, besides sanctimony, and that is their carbon tax. Asked, I think yesterday, why Canadians no longer support their carbon tax policy. Liberal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault pretty much said, it's because Canadians are too stupid to appreciate just how good you have it. So that's what we're going to get into. So we'll start with the Trump presidency. We were here in the newsroom watching this on Monday. Of course, there's all the pomp and the ceremony, concerts galore. I don't know how many times combined I heard Hail to the Chief and the new unofficial Hail to the Chief, YMCA. But boy, we heard those two songs a lot. Lots of Trump dances, including one with a sword. I did not have that on my bingo card for Inauguration Day. Lots of pomp and ceremony. His inaugural speech was different than we've come to expect in more recent presidencies. Normally, an inauguration speech is lots of flowery, soaring language, very aspirational, but very general. This was largely a list of, here is everything I'm going to do this afternoon. And that afternoon was the most action-packed policy session I've seen any politician of any government in any era ever conduct, Dave.
It was an absolute whirlwind. We started the day by promising a new golden era for America.
So it was a little rhetoric.
Yeah. A little bit, but that's some good stuff. Goes to the local hockey arena in front of 20,000 people at like a student's desk and starts signing these executive orders, and the crowd's going crazy, and then goes into the Oval Office, and they're literally stacked that high, and the aide is reading them out. This is to withdraw from the World Health Organization, and Trump goes, "Ooh, that's," and signs away. And he's got the media in there, and they're asking him questions. And I think in that one press conference, he answered more questions than Biden has answered in the last 4 years. So really an incredible day. And for me, the moment I'll always remember, and Derek, you already alluded to it, is the him and Vance doing the YMCA with the swords.
Holy hell.
And then, it continued on to the very next day. They rounded up 308 illegal migrants. They canceled DEI. They
Fired the DEI admiral.
Fired the DEI. They banned any sort of flag, a transgendered flag going up the flagpole. It's American flags only. They removed General Milley's portrait from the Pentagon. So it's unlike anything we've ever seen in history.
Nigel, normally changing, like, there's been significant differences in administration, but they're normally, there's lots of pomp and ceremony, but it's not like, it feels like they were toppling statues here. Like there's just been a revolution. They're tearing down the statues of Lenin. I mean, not to over dramatize it, but it had that kind of feeling, and they're like promulgating just a totally new set of laws here. You've watched these things. I don't mean to be mean, but you've watched these things longer than I have. Have you seen anything like this?
No, of course not. I mean, this is there has been nothing like this, and the time had come for something like this in America in this year. After the 4 years of the Biden administration, there have been so many things that so many people, even if they weren't diehard Democrats, sort of, well, this isn't making any sense. It's not safe to walk down the street. This is not making any sense. My money is going nowhere. This is not making any sense. We walk out of Afghanistan and leave behind $100 billion worth of military equipment. There were so many things that had made so many people unsatisfied. And it reminded me a little bit, not that I am saying it was like this, but it reminded me a little bit of the Reagan era, which is 1980. I think you were around for that.
I was not.
I
was born in the second second Reagan
term,
presidency.
Right? But look, the thing was that Reagan didn't just appeal to Republicans. He appealed to what they used to call blue dog Democrats. I don't know where you'd find one these days, but these were people who were very conservative in their values, but had always been members of the Democratic Party. And they voted for him because after 4 years of the late Jimmy Carter, they were ready for something different. I'm not going to waste time talking about Carter, but the thing was, things had not gone well in the United States during that period of time. Things did not go well in this period of time, and so everybody wanted change. And Trump gave them the reward for their votes on Monday by saying, we will do this, we will do this, we will do this. No, it wasn't lofty and aspirational. It was a plan of action. And then, with a pile of executive orders in front of the press, he started signing them.
I think a pile is underselling it. It was a dump truck. It was a dump truck. Like, he spent hours signing these things between the ones in the Oval Office and the ones at the arena there. I've never seen normally they're always just done in the Oval Office, but he just said, like, I'm going to give the people. People sat in an arena watching him sign papers.
But you see, this was the showmanship of the thing.
Yeah.
People wanted this. You wouldn't always do this, but this was the time to do something like this. Because as you mentioned just now, with the press sitting there and asking him questions, and he was, don't be rude, that's ridiculous, and just sort of handing things off, but then again answering sensible questions. Everybody, whoa, this is going to be a very, very different term. So it's not to say that every executive order is going to be followed to the letter immediately, but he certainly told the people who voted for him, I am setting forth to do what you authorized me to do.
I only recall one executive order from Biden's first day in office. He probably signed more. And this is, I guess I remember it because it's, affected Alberta in particular so much. But Biden canceled Keystone. He said, Keystone pipeline is dead. I think it was just weeks earlier, possibly, that the Kenney government in Alberta had put a couple $2 billion into it, and we bought a lemon. But that was a big thing. That was a piece of meat to Biden's base. But it's pales in comparison to anything like what we saw yesterday. I mean, you were almost just sweating watching him sign executive orders.
We're on our way to Mars. Yep.
Yeah. I believe it. I am quite convinced that easily within the decade, mankind is going to be on Mars. I mean, so it's not all just the executive orders in one day. There is some big aspirational stuff, and that was there. But I guess it could almost get lost in it because of just the tornado of it. Like he was a Tasmanian devil of executive orders.
And all the left had to complain about was Elon Musk. And
Well, you're a Nazi.
you're a Nazi. So there's been pictures of Vice President Harris doing this, and Hillary Clinton, and Pope Francis, and
You're looking a little comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
My left
They're
hand,
already
not the
taking
right
a
hand.
screen grab
Yeah.
there, Dave. Careful.
Someone's already someone screen grabbed you already.
But that's all they've got, and they called everybody a Nazi during the election campaign.
Doesn't
It
work
didn't
anymore.
work.
Doesn't work anymore.
So they obviously haven't learned their lesson. And I guess that's another question. Who is actually leading the Democratic Party right now? They've got to get that figured out, and they've got to reinvent themselves if they have any hope of defeating J.D. Vance in the next presidential election.
Assuming he'll be the natural choice, but it's not always a given. If he has a good 4 years and stays in Trump is going to largely be in the very unusual position, being able to dictate at least the Republican candidate, not necessarily the president, but he'll be able to largely dictate who that is, which is good and bad. I mean, you want someone to still be their own man, and J.D. Vance is going to need to be his own man. He has, as vice president, he has to serve. He doesn't technically serve at the pleasure of the president, but similar to it.
Speaking of being their own man, the other star of the day was Barron. All 6'8" of him, and his steely eye. Looks like he's sort of, all right, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get you, and then
a lot of people are comparing him to Augustus.
Yeah.
The son, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar is the great warrior, but he was the more charismatic one. Augustus, the much more, well, that's where we get the term August from, more reserved, but brutally efficient.
and he went over and
He had aura.
shook Joe Biden's hand and Jill Biden's hand, and everybody's wondering what he said to them. And he's a young man to keep an eye on in the future in politics himself. Even though he's just this week announced he's starting his own luxury real estate empire. So I guess he'll have some backing from Daddy on that
I
one.
was going to say the dinner table conversation must be pretty intense in that household.
But I thought Augustus was a very interesting metaphor to use.
Well, if you had to go back in time and into the Roman Empire, you could do worse than pick the time of Augustus if you actually
probably
had to
the
live
greatest,
there.
arguably the greatest emperor. Not saying he would be as good. Although I am a little sick of family. Like we're getting over the latest family dynasty in Canada. America's had the Bushes and the Clintons. Coming from these royal political families is not necessarily good. But I'll say this: the kid's got an aura about him that is steely, serious. Okay. Anything else we want to cover directly on the first?
Well,
few days
it
here
just
of Trump?
occurred to me that the American Revolution, 1776, they were rebelling against an authoritarian king who ruled by fiat. And, if I were writing for the Democrats, I'd come up with some line about how we just reinvented George III and do this. It's
The problem is
amazing thing.
The problem is neither party has any authority in criticizing the use of executive
No.
power right now. Both of them grossly abuse it. In many cases, though, this was Trump repealing executive orders of previous presidents, including all the way back to LBJ, because they didn't just kill DEI, like they nuked DEI across the entire government. But then they went further and they got rid of the old affirmative action executive orders from Lyndon Johnson. So a lot of this is just rescinding old executive.
Well, actually, it's a really entertaining fantasy because the news came out this morning that people who had been appointed under DEI mandates were told to stay home. They are laid off.
Yeah, they've got a day pay, and then tomorrow they're outright fired.
Yep.
The other thing we're talking about, I think, is the low-class move, I thought, on Biden to pardon his family as President Trump was driving up. And during the inauguration, Trump knew nothing about it. But and people like Anthony Fauci and Cheney all getting pardons.
Preemptive pardon.
Preemptive pardons.
Wow.
But yeah, I
Who
mean,
even know there was such a thing?
no,
You
I
know.
know. But to pardon his family makes him look guilty and makes it look like he ran a crime family for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And we all know about
Yeah.
Hunter.
Yeah. And he promised he would never do that.
Yeah.
This was done such last minute, I think. So the Trump wouldn't put it in his speech. And I mean, it would have been poor, like no matter what Biden's done, as terrible as it is, there's value in the continuity of the office and decorum of the event. It would have been a bit odd for Trump to literally look to the guy standing right beside him and being, you criminal son of a whatnot. Like, but I mean, whatever you thought about Fauci, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on it. I just never followed the Fauci stuff deeply enough. People got strong feelings. I didn't have strong feelings on it before, but now I'm pretty convinced the man's guilty and has committed crimes. Now I'm quite convinced the man's a criminal. Now that's enough for me. He's a criminal. Okay, well, bringing it back north of the border, this is obviously having tremendous ramifications here. That's an understatement and a half. What's really been defining Canadian politics for the last several weeks has been trying to define what is Team Canada. Team Canada traditionally means following the lead of the federal government, Ontario and Quebec. Because that really constitutes Canada right there. Those two provinces constitute a majority of Canada's population, and they're Upper and Lower Canada historically anyway. So they are Canada. But there's been a total vacuum of any federal leadership in this. Justin Trudeau has zero moral. He can't even lead his own party at this point, let alone the country. We've talked about this before, but Danielle Smith has struck out a very different strategy on this than Doug Ford. Doug Ford is probably doing the more politically popular thing, which is to thump your chest and show a little machismo. Yeah, we're not going to take it. We're going to fight them. But it sounds a bit like Chemical Ali saying he's going to destroy the American brigades as they roll in, a kilometer behind him into Baghdad. The fact is, we're outnumbered, we're outgunned, we're outmatched. There is no way to really beat the Americans at their own game here. We're going to have to be smarter. I'm not really sure what a good way to do that is. But it's been very clear from the beginning when Doug Ford, when Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland all say everything is on the table, they mean Alberta's oil is on the table. They don't mean their own primary industries. Doug Ford has never intimated that we're going to disrupt the American auto supply chain if this goes forward. We're going to be willing to shut down the auto sector and throw American car manufacturing into chaos if this goes forward. He's never said that. Francois Legault has never said, we're willing to shut down the aerospace industry and mess with the Americans there. I haven't heard the Atlantic Premier say, we're going to shut down fisheries and starve the Americans of fish. No one has said that. It's always been Alberta needs to be the human shield here, the human economic shield. And Smith has obviously said no. And if we're going to take one for the team, where's the East been for the last decade? Where have you guys been? Well, we have we're not even asking you to make subsidy sacrifices. We're not asking for subsidies. We just want permission to build pipelines to sell what belongs to Alberta. So we're being asked to take the sacrifice now. She's taken a different road. She's gone to Mar-a-Lago, met with Trump. She's been down around the inauguration at events, meeting with governors, meeting with Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State. That's probably one of the biggest key relationships there. Taking a more diplomatic approach. Hard to see if it'll work or not. I mean, it's a complicated administration to get a grip on, I think. But I'll start with you, Nigel. The Liberals and much of the media, not all of it, but much of the media have called her a downright traitor. I don't know. Is there any political resonance with that?
Oh, probably in back east, where we render something into simple 2 dimensions. But Smith was actually elected to represent Alberta, and I think people forget that premiers represent the interests of their province. So it makes great sense for Doug Ford to say you've got to protect my auto industry.
Mhm.
But it also makes great sense for Danielle Smith to say, this is a $120 billion trade in oil that we do with the United States. And the auto industry is worth about 17 or $18 billion. So let's just step back and see, what is the Team Canada approach? What are we trying to protect here? And where she, I think, she did a couple of things that really outsmarted the rest of the premiers and the Prime Minister himself. First of all, when Trump said, look, I got a problem with your border security, she reacted to that. And while they were still trying to charter helicopters back east, she actually had a border patrol sheriffs, Alberta sheriffs, established. I mean, it was a small scale thing, but they were out there with their drones, their helicopters, doing the job, keeping an eye on the border. The second thing that she
It's
did,
going to be a pretty boring border to watch, probably, but yeah.
well,
But that's what the
Yeah,
Americans
well-
wanted, and even if it's a pretty dull border,
hey, look, a good day in a helicopter on the border is better than a dull day in the office. So
That's
I'm
true.
all for it. Look, the other thing that she did, just going down there and putting a human face on Canada. I mean, she happens to be an appealing face. She was exactly the right kind of person that you would want to send in an ambassadorial role to the. But you mentioned a number of people that she'd met with, and obviously a meeting with Trump is the Trump will remember her when he's forgotten Doug Ford. But she also touched bases with Kristi Noem, who's on tap to be Homeland Security Secretary. Rubio, Department of State. This is diplomacy. It's just explaining, everybody take a Valium. We're not all crazy up here. And I have seen it argued. I don't know whether it's based on anything other than goodwill towards Danielle Smith, but I have seen it argued that the fact that that Trump did not announce tariffs on day one against Canada can be to some degree attributed to her own quiet diplomacy of the kind that she recommends to the other premiers. So maybe there is a time to just take things a little easy and not go in half-cocked, as Team Canada seem to be ready to do.
But it's not stopping the Eastern people from going off half-cocked. There was a editorial cartoon in the Toronto Star yesterday that had, Eastern Canada all in their Team Canada hockey jerseys, and Alberta Smith in the old Soviet CCCP hockey jersey.
I didn't see that one.
I mean,
I'm surprised.
who at the Toronto Star to call anyone a communist?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Can you read the Toronto Star?
No, it was in my Twitter feed.
Oh, okay.
I hate read it and see what they're up to.
I read it.
Well, it was Monday was an interesting day because all weekend it was Danielle Smith's a traitor, Danielle Smith's a traitor. Trump speaks. Everybody realizes, hey, there's no mention of Canada. Danielle Smith's a hero. Danielle Smith's a hero. And even some local commentators went from slagging her to praising her. And then, of course, you had Trump that night say that the tariffs are coming February 1st. Whether they are or not remains to be seen. Whether Alberta gets an exemption on oil. Bottom line is, I can't see them putting tariffs on oil when Alberta oil is so important to the American economy.
That's right.
And the last thing Trump wants to do is raise the price of gasoline, because that's the one
They
thing.
promised to cut it in half.
Yeah. And if you're going to put tariffs on Alberta oil, you're not going to be able to cut the price of gasoline.
The issue that we're worried about, of course, is not that as much, for all the reasons you just said. But the issue is that will the federal government put an export tax on Alberta oil? So that's the
And that might be the way Trump could get his 51st state.
Yeah.
I mean,
I prefer to think of it as getting the 13th province, actually.
if we haven't talked about it for a little bit now because he hasn't mentioned it in a week or two, annexing Canada. But if Trump really wants, I don't think it's totally crazy to think that he actually is serious about it. How serious? Hard to say. But if he wanted to annex maybe just Alberta, or to start peeling apart Canada. Here's how I would do it if I was him. I would put the 25% tariff on Canada, except for Alberta. And then watch the cat among the pigeons. The Eastern politicians, the feds, they will come in for Alberta and they'll say, Alberta is not being loyal here. Alberta carved itself out and did Canada dirty. Even though it's Alberta is actually doing reasonable diplomacy right now, unlike the feds, unlike Ontario. And then you'd see an export tax. And an export tax is kryptonite to Alberta. Alberta cannot, under any circumstance, accept that. And then Trump could roll out an offer at that point. And really, what could Canada do? Send the army? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, it's a wild hypothetical, but we kind of get to talk about these wild hypotheticals now because they're only half hypothetical. So if I was Trump and you wanted to do set us among ourselves right now, I would do that because Smith has been doing her job as the Premier of Alberta. She's not the Prime Minister of Canada. I don't like Alberta premiers who have an eye on the job of being Prime Minister of Canada. I want them to be the leader of Alberta and only the leader of Alberta with no other ambition. And that's the job she's been doing, and she gets called a traitor out there for it. I guarantee you, if Doug Ford got a carve out for the Ontario auto manufacturers, no one would call him a traitor. They'd say, what a wise diplomat.
That's the size of it.
And all he's done so far is threaten to take Kentucky bourbon off the liquor store shelves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just a reminder for Ontarians about why you should not let the government pick your liquor. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to move it now to more domestic policy. Obviously, it's got some implication from the Americans. It's now pretty clear America will not have a carbon tax. That's been pretty solidly settled. They couldn't even get it through Congress with Biden. You know, if Biden could have done it, he probably would have, but they had no chance. The Americans have now also, in the million executive orders Trump signed yesterday, they pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. Powerful stuff. Not that anyone actually follows this crap anyway, except for guys like Guilbeault. But Paris is over. Without the United States, the Paris Accord means absolutely nothing. It's done. So the two leading candidates for the Liberal Party leadership and to become technically the next prime minister, probably be prime minister for a few weeks before they get canned, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, both have in kind of a cagey way, without any specifics, said that they're going to get rid of the carbon tax. Now, when they say get rid of the carbon tax, they mean at most scrap the consumer portion. They'll still leave the industrial portion, which is actually arguably the worst part and harms the economy the most. But they'll get rid of at least part of it or rename it or something. I mean, they've renamed the carbon tax a few times already. So, but they'll repackage it in some way. Stephen Guilbeault surprised me a bit when he backed Mark Carney. I guess he's probably the most likely to win, but Chrystia Freeland's I think got a strong chance to. He backed Mark Carney, and Mark Carney had been intimating that he's going to get rid of sort of the carbon tax. And he was asked about that because he is a zealot. If nothing, I think we all respect him actually a bit more than the average liberal because he's not just a politician collecting a job. He is a zealot. He believes in what he's doing. What he believes in is terrifying and terrible, but at least he believes in something. But he's more or less agreed that he's going to have to accept at least a pared back carbon tax, even though that doesn't mean the end of the world, but it means maybe his political career goes on a little longer. But he was asked by a reporter in a press conference, why don't Canadians support the carbon tax anymore? You know what? Let's just play the video.
Is there anything that's as effective or more effective than a consumer price on carbon?
Well, yes, obviously the industrial price on pollution is more effective because it gives us 3 times more emission reduction. So, one obvious answer to if we don't move ahead with consumer carbon pricing would be to tighten a system that we already have for large polluters in the country. That's certainly an avenue. There are other things we're working on. We're deploying a cap on pollution from the oil and gas sector will be a key component of our tool to ensure that every sector of the Canadian Canadian economy, whether it's the aluminum sector, steel sector, auto sector, or oil and gas sector, does its fair share when it comes the time to reducing pollution.
How did the Liberals lose so badly on policy that's been around for 5 years? What went wrong?
Pierre Poilievre went wrong, and he lied and manipulated Canadians on this issue, because for a number of years, large amount of Canadians were in favor of the consumer pricing, and through a campaign that has largely lied and misled Canadians, he's made it a very unpopular policy.
So essentially, it's all Pierre Poilievre's fault. Carbon tax is great, but Canadians are just too stupid to understand how good they have it. Canadians used to like the carbon tax. No, actually, Canadians never approved the carbon tax. They tepidly accepted it because we're mild-mannered Canadians and we just kind of take whatever the government shoves down our throat most of the time, until we finally didn't, and Canadians have turned against it, and they will not be electing any government that runs on a carbon tax. Nigel, how do you digest Guilbeault's comments here?
Well, first to your
You
point
got
about
all your pens in order?
yeah, just
One,
We have
two,
four
three,
here.
four pens.
yeah, you just can't rely
This
on the,
episode of The Pipeline sponsored by pens and
Yeah.
highlighters.
get your Western Standard pen, only $5. Look, the thing with the with Guilbeault and the carbon tax. First of all, there was always an element of dishonesty about it, and it would never came more fully to the fore than when in Eastern Canada he suddenly said, "Whoa, this is hurting us a lot," and because the Liberals had a special hope of electoral success in Eastern Canada, all of a sudden the carbon tax was lifted. That kind of thing made other Canadians say, well, if you can lift it in the Atlantic provinces, why can't you lift it in northern Saskatchewan or northern Alberta, where there are also people who live a long way from regular power sources, are dependent upon hydrocarbon fuels, and are paying these taxes? So right there, you were reminded that this is a highly political tax, and it is separated from reality by that politics. I mean, the idea was you pay tax, you drive less. Does anybody drive less because they have to pay an extra 5 cents a liter for fuel? No, they don't. How high it has to go, I don't know. We're not there yet, and we don't want to get there. Now, for Mr. Guilbeault to blame Pierre Poilievre for alerting Canadians to the fact that this is hokum is actually for him to endorse Pierre Poilievre as having superior messaging and communications abilities.
Well, he said, but he lied.
Oh,
He
well,
lied and said it was not good. No, that's an opinion.
It's if we want to go back over lies with Mr. Guilbeault, we would probably stumble over a few before we went very far. I personally, I'm not even convinced of the fundamental link between climate change and the burning of fossil fuels. There's a whole narrative behind
You're
that.
committing a hate crime now.
I know. Arrest me now.
Going to get us kicked off the air.
Yeah, but certainly the United States is not buying it, or Trump is not buying it, and their own removal of themselves from the Paris Accord shows just how much commitment they have to that idea.
I mean, how stupid do these Liberals think we are?
Plenty.
They must think we're plenty stupid. And I think it's
Actually, he said so, didn't he?
yeah.
Well,
it's worth
the fact that we're against the carbon tax is proof we're stupid.
Yeah.
worth mentioning that Stephen Guilbeault yesterday took a personal shot at us, went on a Twitter tirade
Good
about the
segue.
Western
I wanted to go
Standard.
there. Or there, let's just put it up on the screen.
You know, they've got a problem. It's going to be the albatross around their neck for the entire campaign. Chrystia Freeland, I'm changing the carbon tax. Well, why did you support it for all these years, including like days before you quit as finance minister? You were advocating for it.
Mhm.
Well, I was only following the orders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Canadians aren't going to buy that. And same with Mark Carney. Mark Carney has been a carbon tax enthusiast for as long as that phrase has been going. So, The Liberals are thinking again that we're stupid. They're going to try and take it off the table, leave Polyev with, where's his axe the tax? Well, we have axe the tax. Polyev has nothing. Well, you know what? I think Mr. Polyev has plenty of ammunition to fight back against at least those two jokers.
And he's going to be able to run against the carbon tax anyway. But first, the Liberals are not going to be able to repeal it in Parliament. They're going to get defeated as soon as. If we believe Singh, and that's difficult, but he has now again under pressure reiterated that no, he's going to vote non-confidence with Conservatives in the bloc as soon as Parliament comes back, no matter who the Liberal leader is. Now let's see, that Liberal leader is going to try and cook a deal with him, but he's kind of at the end of his political rope here. He has to bring them down. So the Liberals aren't going to be able to repeal it before then anyway, and this is just going to defy. In some ways, there is no win for the Liberals on the carbon tax here. They can run on the carbon tax and everyone will hate it and vote against them. They can run on getting rid of it and people will just be like, well, you don't believe in anything. You're just going to say or do anything for votes. And we don't necessarily believe you that you're going to get rid of it anyway. Look, Carney, Freeland, here is video from mere weeks ago of you talking about how excellent it is and how stupid you are if you're opposed to it. So are you saying you're stupid now? There is no win for the Liberals on it. If I was Liberals, no politician generally is saying, I'm going to lose and I'm going to go down losing. But it'd be nice if they would just try with a little dignity, go down with the flags, the colors flying on the ship as the shells hit the deck. You're going down. Go down with a little dignity and say, this was the policy that we genuinely believe in our hearts is right for Canada and to save the world from evil global warming. And if we're going to go down, at least we're going to go down with some of our principles. Now, they're raising the white flag on the deck and they're still going to get shelled and go beneath the waves anyway. It's just a sad thing to see.
And I think, Derek, that although I very much hope that what you said about Mr. Singh is exactly so, the very fact that they have a problem with the United States might give him I did say that I was going to bring the government down, but now we must maintain continuity in order to deal with the Americans because the process is.
But thankfully, he's got his pension now.
He'll have his pension.
He'll have his. Actually, for those who haven't seen it, let's put this up on the screen too. Up on the Western Standards website, we have the Jagmeet Singh pension countdown clock. You can see by the second in real time how long Canadians have to wait before Jagmeet Singh qualifies for his pension and will therefore be liberated and free to vote to trigger an election.
And he'll be able to afford things like Maseratis and Rolexes.
Big Rolex, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, there are still quite a few NDP MPs who, in addition to him, are going to qualify for their pension in October. And it's possible it goes out there, but I think at this point, the good money is we're getting an election as soon as Parliament comes back. Maybe even sooner. The Liberals might be smart. Rather than face the kind of humiliation of being defeated in Parliament, just call it themselves. It's like when you're going to get fired, you just say, well, I quit. You can't fire me, I quit. Liberals can dissolve Parliament. So I think...
Sort of like Chrystia Freeland.
Touche, Nigel. Touche. Yeah. So it seems to be the carbon tax is going to end, but I think when we talk about the end of the carbon tax, the Liberals, at most it'll be the way Jason Kenney got rid of the carbon tax. He didn't get rid of the full carbon tax. When Jason Kenney came in Alberta, he got rid of the consumer carbon tax, but he left in place the industrial carbon tax, which is still very costly and damaging to industry, but consumers don't see it directly, and it's not as politically salient. I think, and actually, to be fair, Pierre Poilievre has not said yet if he would get rid of the industrial carbon tax. He just says he'll get rid of the carbon tax. Well, if you're saying you're going to get rid of the carbon tax, that should mean the whole thing. Otherwise, he should be saying, I'm going to get rid of some carbon tax. I'm going to get rid of a carbon tax, because there is two carbon taxes. So Poilievre has not actually clarified on that yet. But I'll go out on a limb and say none, whoever the next Liberal leader and Prime Minister is, it will only be the consumer carbon tax at the absolute most. And more likely, they'll keep the industrial carbon tax and keep as much of the consumer one as they can and repackaged in another form.
I mean, if you believe the propaganda, the consumer carbon tax is returned to you in these checks that you receive every few months. So,
No, you make money on it. They say you make more money.
They
from
say.
it. I mean, what a tax! You pay a tax and you get more money back. Why don't we have more of these taxes?
I would be interested to hear from readers who have actually gone over their power bills and done a computation of the tax they paid at the pump, added it all up, and see if they really do get more back. Because where we're losing is what the increase in the price of food is as a result of carbon tax paid by first big producers and secondly the industry. Anyway, that they could let that go and they would be, for practical purposes, revenue neutral. So they probably will keep the industrial carbon tax because that makes them money.
Right on. All right, our last segment here. Dave, have you prepared a parting shot?
I have.
Okay, well, we'll start with you.
It's good to see some common sense return to the United States again. And the one smartest thing that Trump did was he reinstalled the bust of Winston Churchill into the White House that was put into a cupboard by Joe Biden. And now every day Trump will walk in there and get inspiration from one of the greatest leaders in history.
Amen. So as for me, it's very clear from the recent public pronouncements of the Prime Minister that we have, contra my remarks earlier, we actually do have the power to affect the weather. And I just want it to be known as we enter trade negotiations, I want the Americans to be very aware that we can cause snow in New Orleans if we need to. So
there are blizzards in the Gulf of America.
You bet.
All right. Well, my parting shot, I just want to take note of the other guy running for the Liberal leadership. I still can't remember his name. But I just want to, put the image of the other guy up. Maybe his name will come up there. But there are 4 people running. I want to remind people there are 4 people running to be the next Liberal leader. There's Mark Carney. There's Chrystia Freeland. Karina Gould, who pretty much nobody knows, but at least I can remember her name. But then there's the other guy.
And one more, actually. Don't forget the Campaign Life guy.
Campaign Life Coalition, Mike Clark.
Mike Clark.
Actually, he'll be passing through the Western Standards newsroom today.
Oh,
so
good.
maybe we'll interview him and get him on. But the other guy, he is bilingual. He speaks multiple languages. Unfortunately, neither of them are English or French. So I just wanted to give a little profile to this guy. Remind you don't to vote in the Liberal leadership. You don't have to be a member of the party. You just have to register and vote. So I want to encourage everyone watching the pipeline here today to go online, register with the Liberal Party, and vote for the other guy. All right.
And they don't check. You call yourself Hai Ping, and you'll get your membership card.
Extra fast.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Dave, Nigel, thank you very much for joining me on the pipeline
Always
today.
a pleasure.
And thank all of you for joining us. Remember, the Western Standard is one of the extremely, extremely small number of free press organizations left in Canada that refuses to take the federal Liberal government's media bailout. We rely on support from members and advertisers. So we need you. We want you to join us. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year to get unlimited access to all Western Standard content. Thank you very much for joining us today. God bless.